You also had elsewhere in the AFC West another story yesterday on Rashee Rice, who we all saw go down with, I think it's fair to call it an unusual-looking knee injury in that game. The initial reports were, well, it's feared to be an ACL, which it makes sense based on how his leg bent and what they found. Here we are, and it's, 8 days or so after that injury. We still don't know entirely what direction this is going to go. So break down the process today for Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's pretty rare. I can't remember that many more examples of players who needed sort of exploratory surgery. Like, there's just not a lot of them, where usually you say, like, all right, I've seen this injury before. You can tell the knee stability, like, obviously this is an ACL or it's a MCL or PCL or whatever it is. This one, the angle, usually when it's this angle, you'd say it was PCL or LCL. And I believe there is some damage there. We'll see how much. We'll see if it's surgical. And there may actually be damage to the ACL too. And the problem with an ACL injury, and I think Jalen Phillips found this out this weekend, is almost always, if it's partially torn, you need reconstructive surgery. If it's partially torn, you need to redo the whole thing because it doesn't really regenerate like other things. But he's going to have a scope today from Dr. Dan Cooper, the Cowboys team doctor, and that will determine where he stands. It's rare. I think you kind of mentioned it on TV Sunday. There's a very small glimmer of hope. It's not zero, but it's very small that the damage is, little enough to where he could play this year. But I think most likely they're expecting several months long recovery for Rashee Rice, who really has emerged as one of the best receivers in the NFL over the course of the last 4 weeks.
The last notable player I can remember trying to play on a partially torn ACL was Ryan Tannehill, who came back and rehabbed the entire offseason. And that's a different position. Quarterback's different, but Tannehill then tore the ACL the rest of the way the first week of training camp and then lost an additional season on top of it. That's kind of the danger here, especially when you're talking about a young player with a long career
ahead. That's when you turned Jay Cutler into a Dolphin.
That is correct. And I was marooned in Miami for 2 weeks, and I had the tweet that still pops up on probably a monthly basis on Instagram. Jay Cutler has passed his physical and is now officially a Dolphin. We are coming up. We are now under a month away from the NFL trade deadline. It would be 29 days away from right now. You mentioned one name. I feel like you've tried to get DeAndre Hopkins traded about 8 times over the past several years when he was with different teams, 2 different teams, whatnot. You did bring up his name again yesterday as an option for the Chiefs. We know they're banged up a receiver. Again, we'll see what happens with Rashee Rice. But what are the chances somebody of a DeAndre Hopkins ilk, if not Hopkins himself, gets dealt at some point and quite possibly to the team that's going for a three-peat?
Well, I would say when you would say of DeAndre Hopkins ilk, so like DeAndre Hopkins 5 years ago would never get, he did get traded, but his trade would be
He did get traded 5 years ago, I believe, to Arizona. Yes.
Yeah, I would say not twice. He got traded, then he got released. That would be like Devontae Adams level. Where DeAndre Hopkins is now, still very effective. We've seen plenty of moments, but complimentary piece to a really good team. Like, if he's going to get traded, that's what it's going to be. So there's like a couple of those guys around the NFL. He makes sense to Kansas City just because he built a relationship with them when he was a free agent. And this is sort of like, this doesn't happen that often, but remember, he didn't have an agent. So he was the one talking to like Brett Veach and Andy Reid and like the other Kansas City people. So that's why that relationship is there, because he built it, right? So that's why that makes sense to me. There's some other guys who are like veteran level, very productive, would be the final piece. Like, I think there's a pretty good chance the Chiefs trade for someone. I don't know whether it's going to be Hopkins specifically, because I think they'd like a cheaper option. But like, if that's the best option, I think they make it work contract-wise and just deal with it.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.